use a blurry thing.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Right. Hi, everyone. We would like to introduce our live talk, which will be taking place today between Race and Uzma AXA Coaching and Consulting. In today's live talk, we will be looking at the fundamentals of life skills, and I would like to introduce you to Dr. Laurence Brown here. Dr. Laurence Brown is a university professor and dean, moved into corporate training as Director of Learning for Saudi Aramco, a mentor coach and quality assurance lead assessor, now Director of the National Life Skills Academy, offering 100+ introductory bite-sized podcasts on a wide range of essential life skills and knowledge for young people to gain a stronger foothold in that paradigm shift from adolescence into adulthood. Thank you, Dr. Laurence, for joining us today.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to see you both again.
You're welcome. And we have Jacob Hauser here. Jacob is a professional neurolanguage coach, licensed ELC trainer, and a co-founder at RACE, Coaching for Education. He's a certified and accredited professional neurolanguage coach and a licensed ELC language coaching certification trainer, certified by Efficient Language Coaching and accredited with the International Coaching Federation, ICF. He has a master's degree in applied linguistics, specialization in pragmatics, and 15+ years experience in education. Thank you, Jacob, for joining us today.
Thank you, Usman. Absolutely pleasure being here.
You're welcome. And here's Uzma, and I will be moderating this discussion today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from both of you. If anyone has any questions or comments, please type them in the comment section of the platform you're watching us on today. Okay, so we can get started. My first question I have here is, what are life skills? And can you please share the importance of these skills?
Who's going to take that one, Jacob or I?
Go for it.
You go for it. Go first.
Okay. Life skills for life. Skills that we need to, let's say, move from the home into either university or beyond university into your first job. I mean, in England, we tend to, kids tend to leave home as soon as they possibly can, to be honest. When they're like 18 or 19 or 16, they try and get out of the home and leave and go off and fend for themselves, and get work and look after themselves. But as I've worked with university students over the years, and more so in the last year or so, in the last part of lockdown, we've had a lot more mental health problems with students, especially young people, in those latter stages of adolescence, middle to later stages. And I became a Samaritan. We do one shift a week on the suicide lines. And I would say at certain times of the year, I might get 2 calls each shift from a student who is nigh suicidal and ringing the suicide lines. And so that made me very aware of the issues that they're facing and the depth of anxiety that they're going through. And one of the reasons is because they don't really feel able to face the world alone. And I actually, to be honest, I think my own daughter, who's now 20 and in the final year of a degree, is facing that same level of anxiety that I've heard on the phone so many times. And I think it's because school does not prepare them for real life. Simple as that. I think life skills are an imperative part of growing up. And I think so much of it is taken for granted that it actually doesn't happen. I don't think, I mean, we have 170 titles that came in from 2 years of research globally online from parents and educators and young people saying, we'd like to know more about these 170 items. And I think that's telling in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting, Dr. Laurence. And Jacob, I mean, what's your take on this too?
Yeah, I think life skills. I've always been, wondering. The term itself is 2-word term. However, it's almost a limitless and so broad term when we look at how many life skills there are. Dr. Laurence has just mentioned got almost 200 life skills counted there. So yeah, I do believe that life skills, whatever that helps us to be able to face life, to live our life, whether it's daily basis or a weekly basis, whether when we are at school or after we leave school. Yes, most of the time we face that after we leave school. And yeah, unfortunately, when it comes to school, there is always that leap or gap. We are prepared for something at school, and then we leave school, and then we feel that gap, that there is something that is missing. And there we come with life skills and what we want to bring in actually on the table. This is part of our mission actually on RACE, to bring in this, to bridge this gap actually of life skills here.
That's interesting. You mentioned schools a couple of times, Jacob. How can these life skills be taught in an educational setting?
Well, if I may here, funny you mentioned schools and teaching. Yeah, even though I've been in education more than 15 years, and recently, well, not say recently, around 2016, I was introduced to coaching. So I would say for life skills, I would go more with coaching rather than teaching. So I'm not sure if life skills is something to be taught per se. Yeah, teaching can be helpful, of course, but life skills is more about training, practicing. It's more about modeling and showing, and then showing a model for others to follow. Given, let's say, students coming from education background, giving them a safe environment to try, make mistakes, trial and error, guidance, and that's how we give them that environment where they feel safe, try, and then by themselves find their way through. So I would say, yeah, coaching rather than teaching.
It's interesting you mentioned coaching. Dr. Lawrence, again, same question for you. What would be your opinion on this?
Some life skills are actually taught in an average school curriculum. Study skills are being broadened, and more use of multiple intelligences is coming in. Even the way that the school curriculum is modeled through elementary up to high school, and then up to, if you're doing A levels or IAB, and then moving on to university, and then universities, they're actually preparing you for the next step, subtly inbuilt into the systems they use. So, for example, if you do a degree, what you may not realize is that you're already prepared for a master's degree interview. And if you do a master's degree, what they're building in is the level of expertise and skills and study skills that you already need to move on to a PhD level or a doctorate level, for example. So some of it's inculcated. But I'm talking about for the life skills that we work with, and the ones that were suggested over the 2 years of research we did during lockdown. We got things like bullying. You know, what does the term actually mean? If you ask a kid at school if they're being bullied, they're going to say no. They just don't want to admit that they are. So we found that using different terminologies, different words, they're more likely to say, yes, I am being bullied. Circles of influence. Do we talk about an adolescent's circle of influence? Do they understand about the inner circle of influence and those things they don't have influence around, and how they can spread out their circle of influence? We talk about constructive feedback. Do they really know what it means? Do you know? We talk about coping skills, but we don't teach coping skills. they've heard the term, but they don't know what coping skills are. We just assume they pick them up as they grow older. Well, they don't actually. And they need to know these things. And I don't think school is the place for a curriculum that's as broad as this. Teachers are saying they don't have time to even cover the syllabuses in their working day. So how are they going to possibly bring in things like anxiety and anger and forgiveness and active listening? They can't.
Wow, that's interesting. Where would this go then? Where would these teaching skills be taught to the adolescents, if not at school?
Well, the way we've approached it is by drafting short, informative scripts and then turning them into 10 or 15-minute talks. They're not actually a podcast because nobody's responding. They're actually a talk, is what they are. And we've approached it in a stepped method, whereby we introduce the topic as best we can, and then we talk about its various concept elements as we go through, and we're introducing keywords, the keywords that they really need in order to understand the topic area. And now we're turning these into e-learning courses, short, brief e-learning courses. But do you know the difference, for example, between being sad and grief? We talk about grieving and grief, especially, of course, during COVID. They've heard it a lot. Do they actually know how to recognize grief and the 4 major stages of grief? They don't, generally speaking, but I really feel they need to. We talk about difficult conversations and how to manage a difficult conversation, and critical thinking skills and ideation, and the difference, for example, between a coach, a counselor, and a therapist. They just don't know.
So raising that awareness, yeah.
Yeah,
And that
that's all
brings
it
back,
is.
yeah, raising an awareness. And that brings me back to what Jacob had mentioned about teaching through coaching. How does coaching support these life skills? How can you teach them? I know you touched on it in the beginning, but if you can just maybe expand a little bit, Jacob.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Yeah, sure. So how does coaching support teaching life skills?
Right. Well, right. You see that coaching. You see, well, let me start it this way. Coaching has been there for quite some time. So it's nothing new per se. It's in a way being, let's say we are trying to bring it back rather than inventing something new. And a lot of teachers, a lot of people actually do have some coaching skills without realizing it. And sometimes realizing the skill, but without necessarily labeling it as coaching skill. So I think where coaching comes the way it is nowadays is by making it quite systematic. And this what we're trying to do is making coaching more of a profession. So bring it back into schools as profession. As Dr. Lawrence mentioned, sometimes we bring coaching and the first impression from teachers, what we face is that coaching is another form of assessment. And therefore, the first impression we get is resentment. And that is not really coaching. So I think by raising the awareness of what coaching really is, federations and organizations like, let's say, the ICF are doing a great job of presenting what coaching really is. So by bringing what coaching really is to teachers and educational organizations, starting from, that's another question then. The staff as teachers might accept coaching, but then would you start from the management layer or from teachers? So it's this topic has been. I don't want to be a pessimist here. There has been some, some progress done. I do understand that there is still some way to go. I think personally, I would say we need to bring it more for the management level. The minute they understand more about coaching, what it really is, how beneficial it is, bringing coaching as a tool of let's say guidance and support, rather than, because sometimes coaching is brought as a tool of punishment. We don't want that. So let's say, to summarize that, bringing coaching with the real picture of what coaching is, and then coaching will be accepted, I would say, quite quickly.
Wow, that's interesting. And that takes me to Dr. Lawrence, and I'm just curious to know if you use coaching techniques in your practice as well.
Yeah, we do. In fact, I just spent a week in Saudi. I just got back a couple of days ago, coaching 2 leaders. They didn't know I was going to teach them coaching, but what I was doing was leadership training for a large company, and I had 27 managers in the room, and subtly I was teaching them how to coach. I was explaining, it was all about soft skills and emotional intelligence and the need for leaders to actually move to the Generation Y, the sort of millennium need for autonomy and responsibility, and to allow them to just set them free, really, so they work on their own. And that's how the millennials seem to work best in a corporate environment. But these managers are the next generation, and the next generation are directive and top down, and there's this going on. It's not working. So they brought me in to teach essentially what I realized after the first hour of talking to these 27 managers was open-ended questioning. Conversations with open questions rather than top-down directives, and receiving a coaching conversation. So actually, we spent a happy morning with me giving them the GROW model of asking through questions, the goal and et cetera, opportunities, and then the will, and utilizing that. It's almost a work through schedule with a set of different questions. And I just gave them, I think, 7 or 8 different questions from each. And I said, try and just listen. Try some active listening skills, like teachers should be doing, instead of didactic teaching, because they want to rush through the syllabus and tick their curriculum box every day. Yes, I finished. No, what you've actually done is you've dumped all of that work on the kids for homework to take home to puzzle over, because you haven't consolidated the learning. You could have consolidated the learning if you'd had more of a coaching technique, put them into groups and let them peer teach each other. But that's not how it's done in England. And apparently, from the research we've done over the last couple of years, it's not how it's done across Asia either. They're beginning to do it in the north of Europe, and they're beginning to do it in schools in America, where they're enabling life skills by opening charter schools. So the wonderful thing about the United States especially is that you can, it's so big, right? It's like a massive Europe and 50 different areas. And they're each kind of responsible for each other. There's no real federal jurisdiction. So they can approach their local council, let's say, and ask to open a charter school. And the ethos of the charter school is life skills.
Wow.
Just like the school you introduced me to just now. And this week, you introduced me to that gentleman in the UAE. And then Jackie and Layla's school in the UAE as well, where they're trying to teach more life skills and concentrate more on social skills than on deep academic compliance.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Shifting, right? I can see the shift. Is that what it's? Is that where we're heading to? Do you think?
It's where we should be heading. I know I'm heading into the dark, and I'm just going to switch this light on.
No problem. You got that.
That's it. That's better.
Yeah, I think.
So,
Yeah, I think
please.
funny that what Lawrence has just said, because I remember Martin, who's not with us today, but he's always said that one thing he always does is bringing coaching, teaching coaching, delivering coaching without saying the word coaching at all,
Hmm.
Yeah.
until he's halfway through the session or the workshop, until the participants realize that, oh, this is really nice, what is it? And then he would say, oh, this is coaching. And then everyone, oh, I like coaching then. And then he would go, okay, let's have more coaching then. So yeah, I think that's
That's
that could work.
interesting. That's an interesting take to it. And that brings me
Yeah,
to the question, Jacob, here, coaching in education. What are the
yeah.
pros and cons that you can see?
I can't see any cons except they wouldn't
Exactly.
manage to get through their curriculum. They'd be spending all their time talking to young people and getting them talking to each other to learn
Yeah.
from each other, which is what's happening in a lot of these schools, these
Which is
charter schools now. They're actually offsetting the ages, for example. So they're blending a more of a village learning environment where
right.
slightly more mature children, young people, are actually working with younger kids and peer teaching, if you like. I don't want to use the word peer teaching, but that's what I mean. Peer support, peer mentoring, and they're going to them with questions, and they're doing practical tasks as opposed to sitting still in rigid lines and being thrown snippets of information that they either listen to and absorb or they just fall asleep.
Yeah, you see, Uzma, back to life skills. You've just said the constant pros. The only way we might think of coaching as negative, if we were looking at it from, let's say, if we were the outsider, what Lawrence has just said, the curriculum won't be finished. But then, isn't that what learning's supposed to be, or how learning's supposed to be? That it shouldn't be the way we want learning or education to be is one size fits all, and I believe that puts a lot of pressure and restraints on education. Yeah, we
Yeah.
all have finished the book, but have we all learned what really in that book? So yeah, coaching should be giving giving everyone like their ownership, their individuality back. So I will learn what I need when I need it, and this is how you will get all the different professions and professionals and so on. So I'm not sure. I might be a little bit biased here, but I'm not sure if there are. Yeah, I'd say coaching is all good, except for
because
talking.
because in the end, coaching is simply asking open questions and listening to the answers.
To the answers.
And
Yeah.
everybody could benefit from that skill. It should be the fundamental skill taught in schools. Just because a student's nodding his head of the 30 in front of you, it doesn't mean he's hearing what you're saying. He's just
Yeah.
listening. He's just listening to what you're saying. If he's looking at the whiteboard when you're putting stuff on, he's looking at it, but is he actually seeing it?
Not really.
He's not
Yeah.
listening. He's not listening to hear, and he's not looking to see, unless he's a particularly focused student who's utterly engaged by this topic that they're talking about now.
That's interesting. So learning, I mean, is it what I hear is learning, instilling the value of learning before anything else, and getting them to enjoy the process
Yeah,
for
but you
them to
can't
then
do.
pick up many
Yeah,
other skills.
but you can't do that in a school curriculum because you're hidebound by the testing system.
Yeah, testing system. That's in learning is in coaching, you usually ask the learner to, in a way, to assess and evaluate their progress.
Yeah.
That doesn't and cannot happen at school. And I understand where testing and the testing system coming from, but I still believe that it can be, let's say, it can be modified. And
I was going to ask
hopefully,
you, in an ideal world, Jacob, how would you see that in an ideal world?
well, okay, where do I start? I can start by the concept itself, the term exam and test. How many people, like if I ask you and Dr. Lawrence, when I tell you you are going to have an exam tomorrow, how do you feel? How do you feel
Ne-
about?
Nervous and anxious.
Yeah, there you go. So we all feel anxious and immediately anxiety. And Dr. Lawrence talked about anxiety earlier. What we're trying to do with coaching is get rid of this anxiety. A little bit of it, yes, that's okay. But with this continuous, never-ending, testing and exams at school, imagine putting the students under this, pressure all the time.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into that psychological, mental health, you name it. So yeah, with testing, we're going to start with the term, um, and then the frequency, and then who's going to evaluate the learner. It should be the learner themselves should have say in it, and then Dr. Lawrence as well said the peer support. A lot of students do well if their friends or their class mates, let's say, test them or assist them.
Yeah.
And then yes, there is the part of the teacher and, well, teachers themselves. I was a teacher once upon a time. All teachers, the minute we heard, what did we have, this annual what is it, evaluation?
Mm.
I don't remember a teacher like that, and we were teachers. So yeah, with testing, I would say with the term itself, the word testing itself is just an anxiety trigger. The frequency of testing, and then who does what, and then the percentage. I worked for the Royal Saudi Air Force, and one thing I felt sorry for cadets there. A cadet, I would give a cadet a pass because a cadet would spend months studying certain level at English, and then that wouldn't be counted because at the end there will be a test. So 4 months, like 4 months working hard, that won't be counted for, and then just 1 hour test will decide the fate of that cadet. So yeah, these are a few points I think could benefit testing system in our schools.
Yeah.
We had the same problem in the military college because we were doing city and guilds practical exams, and
Yeah,
and then the testing system was are you able to apply that concept or that theory into a different situation, and is there a solution you come up with? But because it wasn't the style of the schooling that the young people had gone through, which was memorize and regurgitate, then they all failed their exams. So you had this complete mismatch of expectations between 15 years of schooling or 10 years of schooling, and then suddenly being thrust into a UK system of schooling.
Yeah.
25 years ago, the Australia was getting a lot of complaints by employers who didn't know who to choose for their work environments, who to interview, because they were all coming at them with GCSE equivalent O-level type certificates and A-level type certificates, or IB, and they all looked the same, and none of them could talk about the topics really, and they all came with the same number of O-levels and the same number of A-levels, and they didn't know who to employ. So they began something called the Futures Curriculum experiment in about 96, 97, and they interviewed 10,000 people from all of the different areas of Australia, around the edge, not too much in the middle maybe, and they came up with this Futures Curriculum, which was essentially stop giving them the exams and let the young people put their own portfolios of learning together. So when they went for interviews, they could actually talk about their interest areas. They could actually talk about practical things they'd done. And instead of getting them to sit in school, boarding classes when they were 14 or 15, let's send them out on internships. So they were actually part of an adult team with adult responsibilities, working in small teams, learning how to behave like an adult. Yeah. And because they were being treated like an adult, they behaved like adults. So most of the problems in schools disappeared overnight. And this was the same problem in England. So what they did in England was they started teaching maths to the troublesome students in the maths classes by taking them out to the local football stadiums and teaching them maths with the concept of football. Actually teaching them in the stadiums, taking them out of school and putting them in football stadiums. And there were 200 stadiums, there were 200 football teams in England who were getting together to work with these young men, mainly, I suppose, to be honest, probably young men and ladies, for a few hours a week, teaching them mathematics around the geometry of the green field and football. And it made an enormous difference because these young people then saw relevance. I now know why I'm doing this, having worked in an adult team for the last 8 weeks. Yeah. And I've got a portfolio of real, authentic work cases, and I can talk about working in a team and the role I played and what I did and what I learned. So they're actually being able to go with authentic skill sets, for goodness sake. Oh, how amazing would that be? So they did that. They called it the Futures Curriculum.
So teaching out, wow.
It was amazing.
Teaching out of the box.
Yeah, yeah.
But
peer teaching and making it relevant to their lives.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That the next question I had in mind was, how do you expand this to the families and community? And you've touched on this, where the community did get involved, and
Absolutely.
The young men, the young ladies have gone into a football stadium.
Yeah,
so learning doesn't have to take place within 4 walls.
Absolutely not. No. We've had interest in our life skills from schools in Pakistan and other countries, asking whether or not they could have a look at them and thinking of offering them to parents as a list, as an alphabetical list for them or their young people to pick and choose what they'd like to study at home as a side, as a consolidation to the academic learning they're doing. So you could say, okay, my son's suffering from anxiety, we think. So do you have a program on anxiety they could study for a few evenings and actually begin to learn how to control it and actually what it is? Or for example, just being yourself. Do you just appreciate yourself? Have you got self-esteem? They're sleeping very badly because they're studying so late and they're so stressed about their exams, as Jacob alluded to. So why don't we teach them what circadian rhythms are?
Yeah.
They might have a different circadian rhythm to everybody else. That's why I failed everything at school, because I was told I had to study in the evenings to get it handed in the following morning. So I failed all my O-levels and A-levels because it didn't work for me. Yeah. What worked for me, and I didn't find out until I was in my mid-20s or 30s, if I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I can do more work in those 3 hours than I could do in 6 the night before, because that's when my brain is active and focused. They don't teach you that kind of thing at schools. As Jacob said, they stick you in a box. They all do the same thing. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. So expanding it now to families in the community at large is really the next step. I could see Dr. Lawrence taking.
Well, I think that's the way we have to do it. It was always meant for, if they're podcasts, like my daughter, she listens to them on the train going to college every day. She listens to podcasts on the train and on the way back. So she could be listening to 15 minutes of loneliness and isolation podcast, or she could be listening to healthy nutrition, or she could be listening to happiness and fulfillment podcast, or mood swings. My goodness, she's a 16-year-old girl. Hello.
Yeah.
There's such a lot they need to know.
Yeah.
They don't have much time, so if you can condense it and make it meaningful to them, I think they will take it on board themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. We only have a few minutes to go, and I have my last question to both of you. The last question I have is really, how important are life skills over academics? I know we've talked about it, but just a quick sentence each, if that's okay.
Jacob.
How important are life skills? Well, let's put it this way. How important is the brain? So I think life skills are going to be in great alignment with the brain. Talking of emotional intelligence, talking of resilience, talking of critical thinking, talking of self-awareness, that's basically the brain talks. So that's how important life skills are.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And I think if young people from the age of, let's say, 11 or 12 onwards have the opportunity to learn about themselves and realize more about themselves through an introduction to what focus and control means, or being flexible, how to be more flexible, how to deal with interviews, how to deal with mood swings, how to deal with negotiation skills and active listening and problem solving and procrastination, don't you think they might feel a little more capable when they first get into a workplace, when they first go to university and are dumped on from on high and given deadlines and stresses,
Yeah.
to the extent they have to phone me because they're on a suicide line?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. If you only gave them these basic life skills, they could cope for themselves, surely.
Yeah.
Instead of it all coming in a rush, like weights on their shoulders, crumbling at the knees. I mean, it's just appalling, really.
Yeah.
Where are we
Sorry.
going? And true. Makes you think, where are we going? Where are we going with that?
Absolutely. We can only hope for this change to take place, and for our
Yeah.
younger generation to have this shift, and we're here to support them in any way possible.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
guys, I'm so sorry, time is up. We have, I mean, I don't know where the 40 minutes have gone, but thank you so much for coming and joining us today. It was so
Pleasure.
interesting. I really enjoyed our talk today, and I look forward to connecting again. But thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you,
You
Cyrus.
take care.
Lovely to see you both again. Take care.
Likewise. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.